since it's the spooky season, well, at least as of recording this, I got a lot of recommendations to check out these set of reviews by Mandalore on the STASIS games. Now, I don't know anything about these. I've never heard about them before. It does seem to be quite an interesting style that we've got going on here from this just first starting shot. But Mandalore's reviews are always incredibly entertaining. So make sure to go and support the OG video by clicking the link at the very top of the description, as always. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Oh. What the? Whoa! What was that?
STASIS is a sci-fi horror game that initially seems very open about what it is. It asks simple questions like, do you like Sanitarium? Do you like Alien? Do you like man-made horrors beyond comprehension? If so, you're probably going to enjoy this game.
Okay, I actually really like the Alien movies. Well, Alien, Aliens, and the new Alien Romulus were probably my favorites. I'm pretty mixed about Prometheus, not gonna lie, and everything else in between, But this looks really cool.
And I mean enjoy in the same way you might enjoy I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. There's a lot that's obviously vile and
I've heard about that. I've never seen it before. It's probably best that I don't know about it.
And horrific in STASIS, but there's still a good amount buried in the details, including some huge reveals friends of mine have missed. It was made by a very small studio called The Brotherhood, and it's the kind of adventure game you could...
From Fallout? I don't think they're so bad, the Brotherhood of Steel, in New Vegas at least, but I've heard that the writing for them in later games has put them in a new direction, which a lot of OG fans don't really enjoy.
Beat over a weekend. In line with that, the setup is extremely simple and effective. Well, they go for the kill right after the title screen. Our story takes place somewhere in the future, in orbit over Neptune. Right from the get-go, the alien influence is incredibly strong. The slow, creeping string music with elongated shots of space and this vessel. The ship is bathed in smoke and fog, which could be space debris or some kind of exhaust, but it's framed more like a winter storm. It could just be the ship is extremely high in the atmosphere, but it could also hint that things will take a turn for the surreal. For starters, this is not your ship. You've just been suddenly awoken from cryogenic stasis. And while you are confused and groggy, you don't have amnesia. You are John Marichek.
Subject Marichek, John J., died during the procedure.
And I won't be stopping to point out more of this. There are little nods to sci-fi horror here and there, but I don't want to let them get distracting.
That's always really neat, especially when it's done with respect to the material and fits well into the story. I would say that was one of the strengths of Alien Romulus, but I won't talk too much about it in case you guys haven't seen it yet.
Welcome to the Gate Corporation Stasis Club Suit. Please hold still while your biometric scans are completed.
After a quick, medically induced power nap, you recall your last memory was traveling with your family. Your wife, Ellen, and daughter, Rebecca.
They're dead.
Can we tone it down? After a long lullaby, John awakes and discovers that his family is also aboard the mysterious ship. They were intercepted en route to Titan Station, and for what purpose, he doesn't know. It's also unclear why or how he was awoken. Everything is caked in dust and other signs of wear. He finds clues to give possibilities, but nothing concrete.
Security lockdown? Must be why there's nobody here. Maybe they were evacuated.
Sure, maybe. But just because there's no people doesn't mean there's no danger. So become John Stasis and find your family. Let's start with the graphics. For starters, this is a completely 2D game. Everything from the environments to the character models. This is especially shocking on John himself. This man is a sprite, but his animations are frame-heavy, the lighting and the level affects him, and he's capable of dying in so many miserable ways. It has an autosave system, which is nice, but fortunately you can also save at any time, which is good because I wanted to try out the bad options for puzzles and was rarely left disappointed. Like turning on a super furnace that actually melts the skin off his bones. If the ways to go in the environment aren't enough, you can also stupidly use an item on yourself and get a full FMV of you dying with it. It's a grisly game, and I'm generally not squeamish around violence in these, but there is one section where you have to perform surgery on yourself, and failing it will make the torment machine rip your entire spine out. It's sort of like watching a tree stump being removed. I'll save that for the end for those who wish to partake in that. But don't let that distract you from...
Okay, well, at this point I'm mostly pretty jaded to all of these things, so it doesn't really get to me. Although I don't prefer the overt gore that you can sometimes see in horror movies when they're not really all that scary. It's just that for that sake, you know? That being said, I did find Terrifier kind of interesting. I don't really know exactly why that one stands out to me from all the other horror flicks in the same genre. It probably has something to do with Art himself.
From how gorgeous and detailed this game is. And that could come across as weird seeing this industrial hellscape, but there was so much attention and care given to the environment. Each little piece of debris carefully placed where light falls in a room. And when you're in the point-and-click adventure rodeo, those tiny details matter a ton. If it weren't for the widescreen and if this was on a CRT, I would think it straight out of the late 90s. And I say that very affectionately. I'm still having to hold back on what to show, but there's a good variety throughout the ship too. It's enormous, and you can see how areas were sectioned off for crew or for work or anything else. Though the layouts for some of these areas can feel bizarre at times. Rooms can seem far too large for what they should be or placed in a strange area, but it's not inconsistent in a bad way. Like starting off, you'll hear announcements from the ship's high-tech, I assume, computer, which does sound closer to human than some others you run into.
The tower. I am pressurizing the raw materials containment tank.
Very early on, you find a PDA from a worker who is also baffled. He was told it was the most advanced research ship in existence, but it's also over 50 years old. The ship is called the Groom Lake, which could be a reference.
Honestly, that sounds about right. I still remember my university exams where we had to do like general courses in the first year. And on the IT test, the correct answer for what was the current fastest storage device was a floppy disk. I don't know how long they haven't updated that particular exam, but it's certainly been a while, hasn't it?
To the salt flats near Area 51, or it could have been a subtle hiring beacon to let self-admitted rapists know that they were eligible for the workforce.
Jesus.
But anyways, it's an appealing-looking world in all its low-resolution glory. Plus, there are all the great interactable objects you use for puzzles in progress. Hell, even the PDA text logs you find from other characters have all kinds of personal touches to them. It is close to being an outright home run, except for John. As impressive as he can be, there are plenty of times he could stick out for the environment like a sore thumb. He has strange animations at points, but the one you'll see the most is the run. He moves like he's absolutely booking it, but not really moving that fast or far. You do get used to it, but it never stops being awkward.
You're doing very well, Reggie.
What is this?
The animation can also be out of sync with the sound effects sometimes, which can make something like knocking on a door janky, but I notice this kind of thing more when the Forbidden Ones dragging him into the deep doesn't trigger properly. Still, going back to that run, it also has a heavy breathing sprint sound which cuts off on a dime. I appreciate them wanting that detail, but it detracts more than it adds.
Yeah,
it's not hugely distracting, but when it's quiet, you do get the occasional It's still a fairly minor point in the grand scheme. I probably shouldn't say minor aboard the Groom Lake, but hey, the rest of the soundscape is very interesting.
What?
I would not have guessed that would be here.
Yeah.
Most of the soundtrack is quietly building
That does not feel like the right sound for that, but, you know, maybe that's what the people who built this ship preferred.
tension, sneaking in and out and sometimes blending with the in-game ambience. Though it sometimes rises up into the foreground with somber pianos and long, drawn-out strings, there are some beautiful tracks paired with some disgusting visuals.
This entire area is blurred out. What? Oh no.
What's going on here?
I've heard things, but I don't know any specifics. You have to believe me.
Most of those kinds of tracks were done by Mark Morgan, who composed the original Fallout games and Planescape Torment. That alone is a good pick for the tone. However, other composers like Daniel Sadovsky also contributed, so you'll sometimes get more action-y music in key moments.
This particular area reminds me of a certain vault in New Vegas, with a lot of plants growing out of it. I wonder if we're going to have a similar theme going on here in this game. Very likely, considering the body on the left there.
There are also the club bangers, and I'm not sure who's behind those.
Something bad really happened here.
The music does bring some comfort in the sewer of these trying times. The diegetic club stuff is all good, but at its worst, the soundtrack can feel inconsistent and clash at points. It also doesn't help that the action music can be way louder in the mix.
It's always the toughest thing to get down, the mix.
Audio mixing in general is something that Stasis struggles with, but sometimes this adds on to it. Sound volume can range all over, there can be loud peaks and crackles, but most of the effects they've created or are using are very good. So when they're trying to make something sound surreal, it is crunchy, but also incredibly bizarre and effective. For a little comparison, here's a vending machine in the Callisto Protocol. When they break, they slow down or get staticky. Here's a broken vending machine in Stasis.
Oh, jeez. They talk about creepy.
If I heard that at night, I'd get a gun to shoot myself.
Oh, God! What is going on?
Something's moving in there.
It's
too dangerous for
you
YouTube.
to ambush you.
My dear little girl, you don't know how happy we are to have you with us.
Still, most of your time playing is atmospheric and quiet. It helps to build up and accent those other moments. Most of your time is spent quietly reading and figuring out how to progress.
Really makes those other moments stand out. And really any good horror film, or game like in this instance, understands that there needs to be quiet moments too. If it's constantly just in your face, then you eventually get conditioned to it. You gotta lull your player into a false sense of security, or build up the tension leading to the scare. I also think that's the main reason why a lot of horror games have like amazing soundtracks for the resting areas. They're just so relaxing and calming.
Only treasures can be in that doorway. The sounds are a mix of great and terrible, and the biggest gap between them is in the voice acting. The mixing issue is straight up detrimental here. The voice cast is also tiny, and John's is exceptionally good. There are some horrific scenes that are brought up by how intensely he reacts to them. The issue is, he's running laps around the other cast.
Who are you?
My name is Taya Hensley. I'm a botanist in hydroponics. I know you have questions, but right now, you need to get to the trap. Are they also bloodied up? Like
What?
the guy on the before?
You could say that. I'm not sure how many people I'm looking at, but it's like something from a eugenics war painting.
Try to push through, John.
There are some moments where the others
Yeah, I can see it. John's voice acting is really good. And it really accurately portrays what the character is currently going through. Whereas the other girl sounds kind of flat and reading her lines, which, yeah, you gotta start somewhere, you know?
do a good job. I don't know if they were being directed in those or what the deal was. Even with that, a lot of the technical shortcomings are still there. But the issue is that the delivery on some of these can be so bad that it can completely undercut the game.
How many of your cockroaches do I have to kill with it?
Milan, let's talk about this.
This was the last straw.
Yeah, this is supposed to be a highly tense moment, but instead becomes a little bit comedic.
I'm coming for you next. And as for your little end.
Warning. Brakes disabled.
It's to a point where the conversations feel like they're in a completely different world than what you're reading. The atmosphere is outstanding enough that I could still get into it, but when those moments came, they would rip me right back out. It's also possible that Rebecca is some kind of text-to-speech.
But Dad, Sandy said that if you have bad dreams...
Oh God! It probably is. It's very possible with how these lines are delivered. Ooh. I don't think anybody's voice acting during our Danganronpa streams was this bad, so yeah, it's gotta be.
And you can't wake up that, you'll be stuck in them forever.
This was long before the AI voice craze and just seems like text-to-speech, so don't get the pitchforks. There's more to talk about when it comes to the dialogue, but we should move on to the gameplay for now. This is an isometric adventure game, which means there are going to be puzzles, which means there could be a Veil of Madness. For those of you unfamiliar with some of my other videos, I've played a good amount of adventure games. I've showcased some that range from playable bowling alley strike screen to a psychosis type.
I've seen them.
There are some great adventure games where the puzzles are almost entirely reasonable, but even the best usually have some small bits of moon logic. You could say something is convoluted for a situation and you'd be right, but we're now entering the adventure game scale, which is extremely arbitrary. Walkthroughs are always available, but you have to take everything I say here with a big chunk of salt. So, with that out of the way, on the scale, I think Stasis is decent. You can't accidentally soft lock yourself out, items or clues you need are only a few screens away at most, and they're usually right by. It lacks most of what can make the genre unbearable, but there are still some bits. You have a Star Trek-like quantum storage device. All kinds of items are broken down for you to use and combine, but you'll rarely have many at a time. You're not drowning in items, so can brute force some moon logic, but the main issue is pixel hunting. There's not a ton of it, and it mostly seems unintentional. For example, nearly every PDA or computer has a little glint on it, and some items do too. Even without that, it's sometimes obvious what you're supposed to pick up, and if not, you could sometimes read about it. The issue is the world is so detailed that even if something makes logical sense, you might not be looking there. You'll pass all kinds of containers and boxes and shelves that you do nothing with. Sometimes they're obvious clues, and sometimes they're indistinguishable from background objects. Like the locker here is placed between two PDAs, so that might guide you towards it, but maybe not. The most egregious pixel...
Jeez, yeah. This is always going to be an issue with this particular genre, and I don't see any way of getting past it. I actually really liked the function in Danganronpa, where if you hit a button, it would just show you all the clickable items within a room. Although some might argue that that would just kind of point you towards a solution. I still think it could be a good quality of life feature that you can maybe toggle on if you don't want to be like pixel hunting.
Hunt in the game is this one room filled with blood that you're supposed to get blood from, but only from this magical little corner. Again, there's a PDA to try and guide you towards it, but if you didn't move your mouse all the way over there, then you would never know. You can see they're trying to keep the realism and still guide you without the items you need being glowing and obvious, but it still means there will be times where you have to hunt around. Unlike some other games, it doesn't feel like Stasis is trying to do this, but the scales were tipped too far towards realism over convenience. And I say realism for item placement because that chunky blood I found I then had to mash up with a pistol. This is the kind of moon logic to expect sometimes, which isn't insane. They're more puzzles that make sense, but make you annoyed by it. Down in the morgue, you want it unfrozen, so you need to find a way to prop the furnace door open. You have a drill and other items by now, but those won't do the trick. Instead, you need to go to a nearby toilet and fish a dirty rag out of it to stuff that into the hinge. That does make sense, but I'm still pissed off. Welcome to adventure games. There's also a valve you need to...
I could never play these games, man. I would rage quit so hard. And I get it. When you're making the puzzle, you, as the person making it, understand what you want to do with it and how the players... Well, not how the players would react to it, but like you would understand your own puzzle. Making sure that you're giving enough hints to the player without completely giving it away to them is so difficult. It is a balance that few games are managed to strike with every single puzzle that they have.
Turn 3 times with the hint being use all of your might, which I did do, but I could smell how people would get stuck on this. I also think it's the only thing you have to keep clicking on. The big complicated write this down puzzle isn't too tough and there are clues all over the place. And there were plenty of puzzles that were satisfying to figure out. Again, my brain is melted for measuring these things. The setting may be cruel, but I don't think the gameplay is trying to be. On the horror side of things, I do love most of it. It did feel like a sci-fi horror greatest hits compilation at first. You know, I sure hope hydroponics won't be too messed up, but the more it went on, the more fascinating it became. The perspective and resolution also works well for it. Sometimes you're only getting shrouded glimpses of things. Things you may have read up on and may know about in terrifying detail at that point. Nothing ever jumps out at the screen, but the scares in that spirit do feel earned with the build-up. The most horrifying aspects in the game are passages you read, or you seeing what's in a new room. It shows a lot of appalling concepts that are meant to stick with you. It does excel at that, until some people start talking. It does go on sale fairly often. It's currently a little over $1 on GOG.
Oh yeah, because of the voice acting. But hey, at least the horror is apparently good according to Mandalore, so I'll take that as a win. It's so difficult to find good horror games. Well, like good horror movies as well, because a lot of them attempt to do it and fail miserably. And maybe some people might hate me for this, but I wasn't really a huge fan of the FNAF games because of that. It was just constant jump scares, and you could argue that there was a build up to it, but you just kind of got conditioned to it, so it was like frustrating that you failed the game again instead of actually jumping under your chair. Not sure how the series is nowadays, and I didn't go and see the FNAF movie, but I know Kiyu's a huge fan of it, so she'll probably tell me about it whether I like it or not.
For their autumn sale. It bases for around $10 there and on Steam, which is still worth it. But I do want to dig down more into the story, so if you don't want spoilers, go to here.
We're here for the story and the lore.
Are you fucking kidding me?
From the beginning, it was clear this was no mix-up. John and his family's pods were shanghaied by the Kane Corporation, which in-game is somehow an even more evil Amazon. They're the most powerful company and possibly most powerful entity back on Earth. The Groom Lake has nabbed
Wait, you mean Wayland?
All kinds of people in stasis, which they refer to as products. When John goes to medical to fix himself up from nap time, the computer's already set to harvesting skin, organs, and other fun bits.
Of course.
So at first it seems like legal organ harvesting. Except the logs from many staff weren't fully aware of what was happening. The staff thought that products were criminals, drifters, and other undesirables. If they woke up confused or screaming, adamant about who they were, that's either them lying to try and get out, or stasis just causes confusion. Keep in mind, this world has an assisted suicide lottery. Stasis rarely says the problems with the setting directly, but it does give bits like this to clue you into how dire things are. That is smart writing, but it does get undercut sometimes by taking things too far. Like having Kane Corp budget cut out the fire axes. And anus inspection day.
Stay clean of parasites at all times. Mandatory rectal exams are to be enforced.
They do drop this kind of thing early on. It feels like a Fallout bit that's not landing. Having the highly volatile methane tanks directly beneath the crew quarters, that's better. One nurse did try to get off the product line when they cracked open a child's pod. What's interesting is she doesn't quit, she just wants to transfer to hydroponics. The pay isn't as good, but at least I'll be able to sleep at night. So that would make her feel absolved until, hydroponics uses products too. It had to keep being in her face to care, otherwise she just doesn't want to think about it. I mean, calling them...
Considering the type of universe that it's based off of, or inspired by, these characters might not know about it, but once they do figure it out, they just kind of want to keep it off of their own conscience, because they need to do this job in order to survive. So I can get that perspective.
Products alone is a nice little way of dehumanizing them. When John links up with the botanist Taya, she reveals that she's just trying to escape the ship. And she's been at it for a long while. The situation was falling apart over a period of months, and since the final night where the ship was remotely functional, it's been 3. Even Taya isn't fully sure what happened. Well, one of the experiments Kane was working on was mass human cloning. Using lots of product samples for research, they were hoping they could mass produce a standardized organ. Giant vats of hearts and lungs for hospitals, and not the giant vats of half-formed screaming monstrosities. Where some shake uncontrollably, scream day and night, and have been rotting and devouring each other for the first financial quarter of the year. It's still looking kind of bullish to me. Some of the organs they were trying to grow were forming incorrectly. Like a mass becoming a tail that would aimlessly swim around the vat all day, which they named Samantha. Why it became this fucked up is from a combination of reasons. Another department wanted the organs from it, so demanded it got started now, and many planned safety features weren't put in yet. The samples the other department, Project Seed, provided were also all kinds of screwed up, so different vat samples were creating different kaleidoscopes of the human form. And then you have the poor age and maintenance of the Groom Lake. Some of the vats of machinery have mold growing on them. By the time the game starts, it's gotten so bad that it's what the ship computer and your own suit were warning you about. The air is spicy and full of spores. So the result was producing rotten beings of pure suffering on an industrial scale. John electrifying one of their tanks is a mercy.
Yeah, honestly. A classic tale of human beings messing with life. It is the ultimate life form. We must use its cells to further human evolution. And yeah, it'll turn you into a 8-foot-tall monstrosity. But if we're breathing in all of these spores all the time, I don't think it ends well for our main character here. Unless if we're able to find some sort of cure or we happen to be immune to it for some reason. And as for the fate of our wife and child, probably not good. Not good at all. Yeah. It's for the best. Thanks. I know.
Please stay calm.
So maybe some cloned monsters escaped and killed the crew, right? Well,
yeah.
Some did. There were reports of killings and maimings even before the Groom Lake fell apart. Along with the fact the mold may have made it into the food supply or corporate was lacing it with something.
Oh, jeez.
That fungus may have traces of intelligence as well. Maybe the Area 51 connection is alive and well and the many have come to party. The issue is the party that was at the club makes things more confusing. There are piles of bodies that have been completely skinned, but it's slowly revealed that what John is seeing isn't completely foreign to him. There's a lot of mention of something called the Eugenics War that happened back on Earth. What little details you get involve horrifying monsters and remote viewers being used in battles. The result was so horrifying that genetic research back on Earth has virtually stopped. It's highly regulated to stop this from happening again. The Groom Lake wasn't just working on a single project. It's a collection of illegal research, being done on a deep space ship where no one will ever find it. You come across a horribly blown—
Oh god. Then, if it's a collection of things, then this is basically turning into a house of horrors. Walk over to the next room and find a new horrific experiment that is going to kill you. This is not a good idea in any sense, but I suppose, for money, they would do anything.
Bloated giant insect queen, who is being milked for royal jelly, but her offspring are really fucking dangerous. And they're thriving in the fungus-infested hydroponics. As for Project Seed, staff could actually volunteer for that, as long as they had been pregnant. I'm sure only good will come from this.
Oh no! Project Seed? Oh boy!
It turns out that Seed was the killing blow. It was supposedly a super soldier project, until a good amount of them escaped and began to murder the crew. It turns out everyone on the ship, staff and products, have a personal data tag, or a PDT. It tracks everyone, and it's how Taya is tracking John. She can't scan out his family, which doesn't mean they're dead, only that their devices haven't been activated. She can scan for DNA signatures though, so if he can find a scanner, he can send her his information, and she can find his daughter. And then his wife, which would make things easy. The Project Seed hybrid race has also learned about PDTs. By that I mean, they figured out something about human skin let them pass through doors. So they've been skinning—
Oh my god, so that's why all the bodies are there. And they're wearing them as suits. Oh my, is this Silence of the Lambs? They tried to make Master Chief and failed. This is the end result.
Wearing people they come across like some kind of prehistoric tribe. So the surviving crew targeted defenses against PDT users and surgically were removing their own. John has to undergo this in a much more duct tape way.
Yeah, the aforementioned surgery machine. Jeez.
Rebecca, run.
Where the hybrids are born is as nightmarish as it sounds. To the point where I'm not sure if I'm allowed to show it, which might be for the best. But contracted staff or acquired products are used up to create the hybrid line. The hybrids are created by a Dr. Milan, and they're not an original concept. A version like them was created in the Eugenics War, and Milan is a mad scientist who doesn't care about super soldiers, he just wants to make a human successor.
Ah, jeez. As a mad scientist, I do not condone any of these actions. Why'd they have to do all this on Christmas? How dare they? This wasn't even done with humanity's best interests in mind. This is just selfish. Some extremely strange and crazy beliefs, likely born due to the times.
Which is written down more eloquently, but he sounds like a cartoon.
By whose standards do you call me a monster?
So it was this guy. Yeah, his, it's a little over the top. You can't take him serious.
The morals of men don't apply
God complex
to gods.
now. I see.
There's been extensive hybrid research, seeing which ones should live on or mate or just be destroyed. Many you come across are also withering away or passive. They were also being tortured, and you come across a mass grave of hybrids and humans who were all gassed. They were animalistic monsters, but also suffering. They didn't learn much beyond violence and that Milan is their god.
But yeah, like, can you even blame them? They were vat grown. Well, no, not vat grown. But still, they were specifically grown to be super soldiers, and that's all that they know. Really, the people to blame here are the company and the mad scientist who made them.
God? The fungus is not alien life. It first showed up after a bunch of corpse overflow from the hybrids. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, so there's two things I find striking about all of this. While the hybrids were the killing blow, this was a compounding lasagna of terror. The subject matter is amped up, but if you've ever worked a corporate job, you've seen shit like this all the time. Projects being rushed, not enough resources given to maintenance until something bad happens, unqualified people in positions due to nepotism or other office politic bullshit. The company's evil story is not new and will be around long after I'm gone. The issue is, many can be written cartoonishly evil, to the point where I doubt the writer has ever worked an actual 9 to 5. The issues at its core of how things went wrong on the Groom Lake are so mundane, but so familiar. Sure, it has a mad scientist element with Milan, but he had no oversight. And he too ignored other departments to focus on his own pet project.
So, I see. All the conversations, the day-to-day stuff, it feels real. And I think that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the writing in Fallout New Vegas. When you go into an area or a building or a bunker, and then you read through all the logs, and you see just human nature playing out, office politics getting in the way, scheming, conniving, or even being too kind. It's awesome whenever you find a game with a story that detailed, with a side dialogue that's actually worth reading.
Sure, Kane Corp is an evil sci-fi company, but you see the exact laziness, greed, and cut corners that led to the outbreak. The disaster happening isn't even the heart of the horror. The most vile, horrible things you see in the game were planned that way. Milan has been having his fun with what's left, but the disaster has actually stopped the Nightmare assembly line. The worst atrocities were designed, and it couldn't have been done without a lot of apathy from those working there. It still keeps going because the process was working. Kane's research was wiping out cancer and other disorders. The Queen's jelly was developing into being able to instantly heal wounds. They could also use it as an organic construction adhesive because they found new uses for research items all the time. This little hellhole has many benefits to the world, but those who argue in favor of it probably don't want to volunteer for experimentation.
Oh yeah.
How can we allow this?
That's the classic moral question whenever it comes to these extreme experiments. These things that could bring about the death of many oftentimes result in the salvation of everybody. It's a hard choice to make, and people will disagree with each other about it. I'm just glad that I don't have to be in that kind of situation, because I honestly don't know what I would do. I do love it though, when games make you question yourself and who you are and where you stand. I had a lot of these kind of moments when I was playing Nier Replicant and Nier Automata. Just stopping and thinking whether or not I'm actually a monster. I think having that kind of self-reflection is healthy every now and then. Just to make sure you know who you are and where you stand.
This is the purpose of the Groom Lake. It's not on Earth. People can't see it, so they don't care.
True.
So what?
It's not happening to them.
There are lots
They
of
don't
well-written
care.
logs from staff members coming to terms with their life and what happened. They're not all winners, but there are some excellent ones. The modern world has all kinds of aspects like lithium mining that people don't want to think about. This is an amped-up space-haunted house with interesting science concepts, but it gives you a lot to chew on with its repugnant conclusions, which makes the terrible dialogue moments so much worse. There's a part where John needs to burn down...
Yeah, that is unfortunate that all these really good story beats are kind of clouded by some of the voice acting and dialogue. It's like when you see a video game that has an incredible idea, but just not the greatest execution of that idea. Like the last video that we did on Mandalore's review of Ghostmaster was giving me a similar feeling, because it's such a fun idea, but they didn't have enough time to cook, or they didn't have the resources in order to make that vision a reality. This game does have a sequel though, so maybe that happens there instead, after this initial release.
Hydroponics, and a woman has been fused into it through the fungus. She's been watching her child slowly decompose in front of her. Harrowing stuff here.
Jesus.
I need you to crack this flare. The oxygen will ignite. Then you will die.
And seconds later...
What did you do?
I cleared the vines.
With a flamethrower?
Something like that.
What?
He's not a quippy action hero either, he's terrified for most of the game. And Milan goes in on the family too. But anyhow, John is losing his mind while his suit tells him how bad things are getting. It can be such a clever game, like giving you a pistol to make you worried about combat that never comes. The reveal that the Groom Lake was originally a mining ship called the Tower, explaining its vast empty spaces. Kane Corp is ahead of the game because they found a eugenics war vault in Camp 571 in Japan. Okay, that one's kind of ham-fisted. But you know what, even with how disjointed this game can be, I realized this is the Callisto Protocol if it was about something. Except it was made for less than 1% of the budget, and many years earlier.
Damn, dude. Shots fired. Callisto Protocol, from what I've heard, was not very good. and it was kind of a disappointment considering all the hype around the Dead Space devs, I think, or some of the team were working on that. I do also agree that it's a brilliant decision to give the player a gun, and with that comes the expectation of combat, which builds up the tension throughout the entire game, where you're kind of like being careful and watching quarters and making sure you don't run into enemies, but it never actually comes. The greatest fear imaginable comes from the mind of the viewer themselves rather than whatever you can show them. So making sure to never show them the monster or whatever force they have to fight against is paramount to any good horror. The moment you do the reveal has to be built up to it, and then after that, every single other reveal is not going to be as impactful. Sometimes it even makes the scary monster not scary anymore. Or even from a storytelling perspective, keeping things close to the chest without telling the viewer exactly what's going on until the very end can be very, very good, depending on how it's delivered. A horror movie that I think does this incredibly well is Hereditary. If you guys haven't seen it, I would highly recommend watching it, especially since it's the spooky season. It's a very, very good horror movie. But it's one of those shows where, upon rewatching it, you can actually see where it's leading to, but on your first watch, you have absolutely no idea what's going on. And that fear of the unknown is powerful.
Look, there's even a two-headed man. John burning down hydroponics does cripple the ship, and things get insanely dark from here. Milan takes revenge on John's daughter.
Of course. Hybrid? Oh no.
The child is completely obliterated, which is taboo in most games. Or at least it used to be. But here's where things take a turn. He has Rebecca's blood, so Taya can find Ellen. Taya does find her pod but gets captured by Milan, so John Stasis goes to confront him. To cut the confrontation short, he does defeat Milan but injures himself in the process, and Taya is revealed to be a traitor. Kind of. She also wanted to find Ellen because Ellen has the right genetic makeup to be a living USB. She could only find John and woke him to get to Ellen. Taya has stored the Groom Lake research into her bone marrow. She too also wants revenge on Kane Corp for killing her husband, and she can also get rich off of it. Or something. You pull your ripped out PDT out of your quantum storage device and the turrets turn her into cheese. The escape ship only has room for one pod, and this is where people get thrown off.
Destination changed.
I love you, Ellen.
He sends her off to escape alone.
Oh, then perhaps the sequel to this game, you follow Ellen instead, and that's where the story of our boy here ends. That's unfortunate, but also not entirely unexpected, given the setting. What? Wait, she was already
Christ,
dead?
You didn't notice she was dead?
Huh?
Well, really listen to how he delivers that.
I love you, Ellen.
Some players still think he just didn't notice. If you were reading carefully, you learned her fate, and it only came with a small audio sting. All game you were bombarded with names, but did you remember your wife's in the hybrid birthing room?
Oh no.
Fucking hell. How she died exactly is ambiguous, but there is a scene that calls back to the beginning that could give a good hint. Beyond that, John is losing his mind, like, that little girl looks nothing like Rebecca. There's a lot of psychological ambiguity I don't want to get into, but I just know his family's dead. And he does too. Maybe his memory of Rebecca is implanted and that's why she has a robot voice. No, that's coping. Stasis is a...
Yeah, no. That was just text-to-speech. But dang, that's a pretty big reveal. I actually kind of like that twist. But it's so subtle that it looks like most people missed it, which I don't know how great that would be. Because, I mean, your reveal kind of loses impact if nobody understands it. So then, yeah, I take that back. It's just bad news bears for literally everybody. And I have no idea where the sequel picks up. Probably a completely different set of characters.
Brutal, dark game, and it got a sequel. And I'm of course talking about the free sequel, Kane. People say to try this to see if you like Stasis, and they're wrong. It stars a pregnant woman named Hadley, but there is no hope here. Besides the art shift, when they were going to sacrifice her fetus to whatever the fuck this thing is, I was compelled, professionally of course, to see what would happen if she didn't escape. It just fades to red. It has a large hub area, moon logic puzzles, but as someone who nearly loved Stasis, the dialogue. Holy shit.
Let's hear it.
Head towards the screaming. Clever, Hadley.
You're scared?
Heck yeah, I'm scared. Holy Toledo. What's the
Oh my god.
No, why would you do this? Don't say it. Please don't. My heart can't take it. No, I despise Kane. I hate it. And I don't
oh god, what is this?
want to look at it anymore. If you want to try it, it is free, but it is not like the first game.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I think there are moments where it can be funny, but I prefer my media taking itself seriously. Especially with modern movies, I feel like we've kind of gotten used to, or perhaps jaded to the fact that all these movies know that they're movies and are constantly making jokes toward the audience, with the characters knowing that it's a movie. And in a movie like, well, basically anything featuring Deadpool, it makes sense, because that's his whole thing, his whole shtick. You go into it expecting that. But other movies also attempt this, and it's gotten old. Or for like video games, I think one that had extremely cringy dialogue was Forspoken, I think was the name of that game, where the character was talking all about how they got isekai into a different world and how all this magic was super cool and shit. That was just really lame. I don't know. I think most people would agree on that one, though. The Lord of the Rings trilogy took itself very seriously in its fantasy setting, and that is why, for many, many people, it is one of their favorite movie series ever. And I can agree to that.
I was so close to loving Stasis. Every cell in my body is screaming that this should be a favorite of mine, and it still feels like that. But there's still too much frustration in some puzzles, the jank in general.
Just a little too much,
Kane,
yeah.
Some of the dialogue scenes just absolutely torpedo the atmosphere. It's hard to convey the shifts through a video like this, but they're breakneck. Now, beyond Kane, they did do a proper full-blown sequel, where you investigate a lost deep-sea oil rig. This game is next.
Okay. Yeah, we'll be jumping into that one next.
Do I ever go back to play some of the stranger games? I generally do if they were very fun, or if there were strange things that I might have missed in them. I do need to go back at some point, but I've heard there's a part in Mystery of the Druids where you can be arrested by the cops by trying to go back to France, and I might need to see that with my own eyes. What drove me to see Legion to its
That sounds
end?
awesome.
Childhood-fueled spite. Will there be a video on the current Warhammer 3 situation? For those who don't understand, it's still a very buggy mess, and they just released a horribly overpriced DLC. I'm still not a fan of the campaign art shift, and the core is still so buggy, I just haven't played as much as I did.
Thankfully, the game is in a much better place nowadays, but oh boy. I'm glad I wasn't there for the initial release.
Warhammer 2. The other Total War guys are digging into them pretty appropriately. I try to make videos to last, and I don't know what I could add. It would mainly be showing how broken things still are to a larger outside audience, but I'll think about it. Do I enjoy playing or DMing more? Definitely playing, but one-shots are fun. Will there be another mod video? I am hoping for one by the end of the year. I've wanted to do for ages now. I had to space it out.
Oh my god. Oh god. Oh jeez. Honestly, really good concept. That is kind of just muddied by some of the less than stellar areas of the game.